Natalie Simper, and this is The Limitless Musician, a podcast by KE Creative. Our team helps modern musicians find modern solutions to building a sustainable music career. Along with my co-host, Dr. Katherine Eminent, we will help you learn what it takes to build a career that enhances your life instead of restricting it by becoming the limitless musician you are meant to be. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Natalie, one of your co-hosts, and I'm not alone today. We've got right. Katherine. Yes. Katherine, our co-host. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Hanging in there, getting ready to teach another wonderful afternoon of lessons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're kind of different this week. Usually we kind of have a similar schedule week to week of like going to schools and teaching students. And I'm on fall break, which has been nice. I literally got a massage today.
Yes. Well deserved.
Yes. So we're kind of, on opposite, so close and yet very different things going on in our studios.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got Grim in the studio as our fur assistant.
Yay, Grim.
And today's episode is going to be continuing our discussion on embracing authenticity from the last episode of the podcast. I posted a couple of different things on Instagram since then about how to embrace your inner self and how to take care of the true you, what you do outside of the practice room and your musicianship in order to keep yourself in a position to be motivated, driven, to thrive in your career, as opposed to feeling like you're just marking time and living your life on someone else's schedule. So I thought this would be a perfect time to talk with someone else who also feels the same way about being your, best and truest self, and figured having you with us to talk about that would give us a lot of ideas and insights about how to really show up as yourself outside of your career, but also, as you're showing up and doing all the musician stuff.
Yeah, for sure. In the last episode, everybody, if you didn't listen to it, you should definitely go back because there's some awesome gems in there of wisdom that Natalie shares. So thrilled to continue this conversation. It's such an important one.
Mm-hmm. And I think in music, especially classical music, we have such an established tradition and history of this is the way that things are done. This is the way that things are performed. This is how you approach building your career. This is how you network and so on and so forth, that we don't really talk a whole lot about how to show up as yourself and prioritize yourself while you're doing all of those things that have always been done. What has been your experience, Katherine, with having to balance being yourself, whatever that entails, but also feeling that pressure to show up with the expectations that are established by the classical music industry?
Yeah, for sure. So, I've thought about this at length over many years. And I think that in a way, it's very interesting because I think that even though classical musicians are very creative, it's almost like we crave structure and we crave being told what to do and we crave a template and we love following the direction. So it's like this weird thing where it's like, yes, you're a creative being, but it's like we all have that perfectionist tendency. We're good students. We get told what we need to do, and then we do it. And so, for my path, similar to your path, we were told what to do, what we needed to have on our musical resume in order to make the odds of getting the job better. So we did those things and we didn't get the job. And so then that expectation of getting the job from doing the things and fitting into the mold and checking the boxes on our little box checking list that we love so much, that didn't turn out the way we were anticipating because of how things change, right? So here we are taking ourselves muting ourselves and making ourselves do things that maybe we don't really want to do, that are not authentic to us, but we're doing them anyway because we feel like that is the only path to success. And so it goes like, if I do all the things right, and if I am really good at doing things, even if I don't like them, then I will have the sense of stability and success that will come later. And that doesn't always happen, right? So I know for me, for example, I love playing an orchestra. Like, it's like the best, right? Like, you're in the middle of the music and it's amazing. But I get so stressed out when I'm playing like a masterwork or something that I'm going to screw up. And especially like around some other musicians where it feels super judgy or whatever. And so I stopped auditioning for orchestras, and everybody's like, oh, you have to have an orchestral position before you'll even be considered for this. And so I was like, ugh. And so then I kept putting myself through the torture of taking these orchestral auditions, even though it was not authentic, it did not feel right to me, but I still did it. And even when I did it and I got the gigs and I was doing the stuff for the resume, it still didn't bring me the end goal that I wanted. And so upon years of reflecting on this whole thing, the thing that I have discovered is the sooner that you start realizing those things that are not authentic to you, and the sooner you stop trying to fit into this mold because it's safe, because you're scared to be yourself and you'd rather just do this thing that everybody else is doing and that, your teachers and mentors are telling you to do, the sooner you start leaning into actually cultivating your life around the things that feel good to you and the things that bring meaning to you, and you start exploring that, then actually the opposite thing happens from the traditional path. So what I mean by that is, in the traditional path, you do all the things with the expectation to get the job. The way that I've seen that it works is that you do the stuff that fulfills you and you keep getting opportunities and stuff to do stuff. And then that actually creates the job for you instead of waiting to get the job, right? And we've seen this happen for many of our clients too in the past, where they really dig in and they really serve their community and they really are their authentic selves, and suddenly jobs are created for them because of their authenticity versus trying to just sit in the box that they feel like that they have to fit into. So it's hard because we don't like being ourselves. We'd much rather be told what to do and how to do it and feel like that we're getting the A plus again, having a 4.0 average. But that is something that the sooner that musicians can start figuring that out, the better.
Absolutely. And I remember a couple of years ago when I was having this crisis of like, I want to be a classical musician, but I also don't want to do like the things that we're told we have to do as a classical musician, like, go get a doctorate and put yourself through the process of going through a million auditions and, maybe never ever landing one audition or one job. But music is something that has always been a part of my life. And so I knew that I had to find a way to be a classical musician, but also be myself. And I realized, I don't really know who I am, well, who am I outside of my identity of being a classical musician? Because I had spent so much time playing the right rep and taking the right auditions and, talking to the right people and applying to all the right festivals and competitions and auditions. And none of it was really feeding my soul. And even though I am myself, like nobody else is me, I didn't really know who I was. So when people would ask me, who is Nathalie? I'm like, your guess is as good as mine, because I certainly don't know right now, and I kind of had a little existential crisis of like, who am I outside of being a musician? This is all I've ever lived for, because I went through 2 degrees and I literally, since I was 9, had dedicated my life to the musical discipline. So it was really a turning point for me because I realized I actually need to spend time with myself instead of just seeing myself as a tool for my career. I saw, myself as the person who was carrying out all of these things, who was putting in the time in the practice room and showing up and performing all of these gigs, but I was just a vessel for the music, as opposed to I am a human being with interests and quirks and values. And on top of that, I also happen to be a musician rather than the other way around. So being able to really think about, okay, I really hate doing auditions. I hate that process.
Yes.
So then, if I'm not devoting all of this time to practicing, preparing, and doing the auditions and traveling and all that time, effort, and money, then how am I spending my time? How am I going to use this to actually get a result that does make me happy, that does make me feel fulfilled, and like my career has a purpose and has a direction? So yeah, I think, if you haven't already had that kind of thought process or realization, it's something that it takes a lifetime to figure out, because you're always changing. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So it definitely is something that takes constant attention and care of who am I and how can I serve myself so that I can then serve a greater purpose, whether that's your career, whether that's, helping and how you connect with your community, your social circle, your support circle, and all those things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it is, I mean, I know that like I got sick of hearing this when I was in my 20s, but it does get easier the older you get because you get more experience and you start leaning in more and being choosier with how you're spending your time and who you're surrounding yourself with and what you're using your time for in your life. And so it does get easier to figure out who you are as a human. And obviously we are more than our instrument, we are more than our music, but oftentimes it feels like that is like our number one thing that we are is that musician.
Right. And it's easy to fall into that process of thinking because, when you're in music school, when you're in lessons or rehearsals or anything, everything that you are working toward and everyone else, if you're in an ensemble or something, you're working towards doing the music a service. It's not about what you want. It's about what the ensemble needs to do as a group. It's not about what you want when you're performing a solo or performing on a recital. It's about, being as true as possible to the composer's intentions. And it's not a bad thing to be in service of those things. That's why we enjoy creating music. But it then creates a very easy path to always put other things in front of yourself. And I think that's why a lot of us are people pleasers.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
absolutely. Yeah, we value other things more than we value ourselves. And sometimes I feel like we hide behind it, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, we
Yeah,
hide behind it.
totally. I remember all of the like late nights and the stories of people bragging about how they fell asleep in the practice room or had to get kicked out by the custodian or what
Yes.
have you, and or like, oh, I've only eaten a pack of gummy bears today and it's already 6 p.m. and just all of the things that we sacrifice. And sacrifice isn't a bad thing, but if you're always sacrificing from yourself, where you are the one who is carrying the burden or the consequences of those sacrifices, then there's not a whole lot of you left.
That's right.
and making music and serving those other purposes, it gets tiring, exhausting, and then that's when you think, well, why am I even doing this, or do I even want to be a professional musician? Because I remember a time when I actually enjoyed making music instead of just doing it to pay the bills. And that's why I think it's so important to have these open conversations about, self-care and putting yourself first, because a lot of the traditional classical music career paths have been only in service of, your institution or your organization or the music, and that's the artistry in itself, right? But you can't be an artist if you're starving yourself, and that's, yeah, that's a whole other bag of, a can of worms that we could open up, in a lot of other episodes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I think that, we use the vehicle of going through school, doing the things that people do, taking the classes that everyone has taken, trying the things that everyone has tried. I think we have to go through that as the vehicle to finding the things that actually bring us meaning in our life, and to know the things that we don't want to do, and start being able to cultivate the life around those types of things. For me, for a long time, it was just about, like, being the best flutist I could possibly be. It was about showing up all over the place and trying to prove that I knew what I was doing, that I was valuable, and that, yes, you should hire me. Yes, I do know what I'm talking about. Da, 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 da. And then I started, the more and more I did that, I was like, you know what? There's so many people who are good at the same things, like, and that's the same thing that we've talked about before with the red ocean and blue ocean, right? That there's so many people that are good at the same things. But when you take a step back and you look at, what's the thing that you're particularly good at, and what's the thing that that lights you up, that you're excited to talk about, then that really helps move your career forward and makes you feel more successful, because you're literally carving out your own path with that. Most of the time, too, whenever you do figure that out, then you're able to put yourself and your wants and your needs first, and not feel like you're strung out all the time with doing everything for everyone and wearing 5 million hats, but not feeling really fulfilled, just feeling like you can only do everything just okay, instead of really digging your heels in and making an identity for yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, I was actually scrolling through Facebook the other,
Yeah,
like just one of my doom scrolls.
of course.
And I came across this video. It was like an interview with Nick Saban, which I am not a sports person. Well,
Uh-huh.
I should say I'm not a football person,
Okay.
but I do know who Nick Saban is. And so he was talking about, what it takes to be successful and to have a really fulfilling career. And so he said something along the lines of, you have to do what it takes in order to be good, and you have to make choices about these sacrifices that you make in order to be successful. Like you can't choose how to be successful or what you need to do in order to be successful. And it kind of got me thinking, because I was like thinking about, in preparation for this episode as well, I was thinking, anything that is worth having requires sacrifices. And while, I do agree to some extent that, there are just some things that we have to do in order to be successful in our career. Like if you want to master your instrument, you have to practice, you have to be disciplined. If you want to have an orchestra job or a professorship job, there are certain things that you have to do. And but I think that you can make choices of how you do those things, right?
Mhm.
So you can choose to pull all-nighters and completely ignore your personal wellness and justify it by saying, well, but I'm spending all that time practicing my instrument or trying to move my career forward. Or you can choose to prioritize yourself and instill habits, much like we are disciplined in music. You can be disciplined in how you take care of yourself, so that when you show up and make these sacrifices, again, you're not sacrificing yourself, you're sacrificing time and energy and hard work, but it's not coming at the price of your mental, emotional, physical well-being. Because we're in 2025. Like, we don't have to be, we don't have to do things the way that our parents did it, or their parents, and all the other generations of musicians that have come before. We can figure out what to do. And thankfully, there are more conversations and more resources becoming available to help musicians, focus on the things that are really important. Because after the music is gone, all that's left is you.
That's right. That's right. Yep. And, I always think about, we talk about career diversification all the time. And I always think about, like, well, what would happen if, like, what would I do if there was something that happened that would, make me no longer be able to play the flute, or, something like that. And I think that while that is a little bit dramatic way to think, I think it does tell you things, because especially these days, we don't know where the world is heading. And it can be helpful to have some of those ideas rolling around in the back of your head of how are you going to keep yourself afloat and stable, as well as mentally and physically healthy as you move through life. So yeah, I think that, sacrificing oneself and one's health in order to achieve things is not the way to go. And of course, yeah, we have to do it sometimes. Like, there's no way around it, but it should not be the way that you function and you operate on a day-to-day basis.
Right, right. When those happen just here and there, they're so much easier to handle because you're not being worn down by them all the time, So then
Yes.
you are better equipped to handle those moments where it's like, okay, I can't make all the decisions. I can't make all the rules of how this is going to play out. But because I am stable in all these other places, I can handle this better. I can find a solution a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. And that
Yeah.
again is all about knowing who you are and your identity and being authentic to yourself and what you need and knowing what you need.
Yeah, I was thinking about when you said, oh, that was really dramatic to think about, like, what would I do if I couldn't ever play the flute? And I've had similar moments in my life where, I've ignored my health, or there are things that have come up because of the habits that I've had when trying to focus on my career, that it's like, that's actually a real possibility
Yeah.
of, like, I may not be able to play, or I may have to be involved in music in a way that I never really imagined for myself. And, more recently, I've come to this question that I ask myself pretty frequently to kind of keep myself centered and remind myself that as much as classical music is a huge part of my life and my identity, it's not the only part of my life and my identity. The question I ask myself is, if I took away everything in my life that revolves around classical music, who would I be?
Hmm.
And when I used to ask myself that question, like back when I was in grad school, was the first time I remember asking myself this question. I had a really, really grim answer. I was like, nothing. I'm
Yeah.
nothing. I'm nobody, right? I would be nobody without this. And as I ask myself more frequently, I have been able to answer that, a little with more clarity, with more understanding, and a different perspective of, I'm a dog mom. I love tacos. I love reading. I love sunshine. And, I'm the kind of person who values communication and honesty, and, all of these other things. I can just keep going on and on and on, where before I was like, can you come back to me in like 5 to 6 business days?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And it's important. I mean, it is important. And as I've done this for many years, I've really also noticed like I asked myself the same question, like if it wasn't in classical music, like what would be still fulfilling? It just
Mhm.
happens to be that classical music is the vehicle that I have chosen to do the things that fulfill myself and my soul. And for me, professionally wise, like mission in life and working is always been helping and teaching others and showing people how they can be confident in whatever they choose to do and navigating the ways to help them get there to achieve different goals or whatever. So it could be through music or it could be through, I don't know, animals or whatever. But that's another way of looking at it too is, what fulfills me personally, but also professionally with your identity.
Right. And you say this all the time. And I also feel the same way that a lot of the opportunities that you've had and that have been really fulfilling in your career have come because you've created them
Mhm.
rather than trying to seek a specific path in order to get there. You've created them by being yourself, by showing up and having that goal, that mission of serving and helping others be the primary focus of your interactions with people. They see that and it turns you into a magnet of people who just want to be around that energy, who see the value in how you manifest that in the things that you do, and that you've been able to create that career that maybe it doesn't look exactly the same way that your teacher's career did or that other people have these expectations of, but it's a career that has served your life and has helped you be true to the things that are important to you as an individual.
Oh yeah, for sure. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to do that too." And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can do it, but it's not like one day I woke up and decided that this was the thing I was going to do. It manifests itself over time and observation and noticing and all of that. It would be so great if we all had these like great ideas that were just served up to us on a silver platter. Like, you would be perfect at doing this career. You would be perfect at having this job. Go for it. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And it takes a lot of self-discovery. But once you do find it, then yes, it is incredibly fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. I had this moment when this was about, it was a couple years after I had finished my master's program, and it was very difficult. And I ended up quitting classical music cold turkey for a year before coming back. And, I reached a point where I was kind of getting my groove back and my momentum of, okay, like I'm performing with all these orchestras and I'm teaching all these students and I'm back into what I want. And the thought came into my mind of, like, do I want to go get a doctorate? Because that's what everybody does is, they get all their degrees, they become Dr. So and so, and then that job is supposed to, land in their lap after they finish. And so I was thinking, well, what are all the reasons that I would want to get a doctorate? And, originally that was part of my plan. And my goal was after getting a doctorate that I would teach at a university or a college, that I would be performing with orchestras, that I would have a private studio, and I would be able to help all of these people in these different facets of my career. And I sat for a moment and thought, okay, well, what am I doing right now? Well, at the time I was teaching at a private college. I was subbing with a whole bunch of orchestras in my area, like in a different city almost every single weekend. And I had, a growing private studio. I think I had 12 students at the time.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, if I already have these things, then I don't really need the doctorate to
Right.
have the career that I want. And that was a light bulb moment for me that was like, oh, okay. And just focusing on what is really my purpose and what I want out of my career, how it's going to serve me rather than the other way around, then I was be able to get all of these opportunities that I had been wanting for myself in the first place, that I had been working towards since I was in high school and decided that I wanted to be a professional musician for the rest of my life. So it's definitely easy to walk the path that has been laid out for all of us as classical musicians. But this day and age, like, the world is changing, society has changed, like everything looks so different even than it did just 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are wanting to do things in a different way, in a way that maybe your classmates aren't doing, or that your professors haven't done before, or that you don't see other colleagues doing, it's okay to step outside of your comfort zone. It's okay to do that. Just because nobody else around you is doing that doesn't mean that it doesn't have value, that it's not going to bring you joy, and that can't turn into maybe something that is the turning point for your career to be what it is that you want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about a couple of things that we do, because you and I are both very, very busy musicians and wear tons of hats aside from like performing and teaching and stuff. So I thought it'd be good for us to share the kinds of things that we have done after, our experiences of learning how to take care of ourselves and recenter ourselves on our priorities, so that we can have these careers that feel satisfying and exciting and fulfilling.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you do, Katherine?
Um, well, I think these days for sure, I very much limit the number of students I teach. I limit the number of schools that I go to. I don't say yes to everything. I'm very, very picky and choosy with that, so that especially now with having a baby, like I want to be there for bedtime. Like, we have our whole routine. We have our little dance that we do. Like, I don't want to miss that every single night. So I definitely prioritize my time a lot more. I make sure that I am done by 7 o'clock every night. On occasion, of course, like, stuff comes up and can't do it. But as a rule, that's when I'm done for the day. I also really make sure that I have time with my family. So on the weekends, taking my baby on walks and stuff around the neighborhood and talking about the trees and the sky, and making sure that I have some physical movement and in my life, as well as some daughter time. And recently I've been really getting away from screen time. Like, I put the phone down when I'm with the baby, so that she doesn't see this black thing that's this rectangle is more important than she is, or why can't she play on that thing like mommy does. So I think that those are some things that I do. And I also really am into the meal planning stuff. I don't go grocery shopping or cook. I have my husband for that, thankfully, but I definitely help with the meal planning. So just having those things be stable in my life have made it so that I can show up in the way that I want to show up for work stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Yeah, I also prioritize my time. I'm very organized, like it comes very naturally to me. And I think that's why being a classical musician appeals to me. Because like you said, like I think at the beginning of the episode, like we thrive on structure, and I'm definitely that kind of human. So I have my time, my days planned out. And even though every day is a little bit different, I try to plan the same kind of things on the same day of the week. So on Mondays, I'm usually doing some kind of errand or chore. On Wednesdays, I'm going out to do school visits. On Fridays, I'm, doing groceries or food prep and taking the dogs to the vet if they need to go, so that even though every day looks a little different, it feels a lot more consistent and more like a routine for myself, so that I can at least predict what my week is going to look like, even if the timing is a little different. I also try to get away from screen time, which is so hard these days because it's like you see one thing and then 40 minutes later you're sucked in. You're like, how did this even happen?
Yes.
So I've been trying to really, alarms have been my friend, surprisingly. I've never been one of those people that like live by the reminders on my phone or the alarms, but these days, it's been harder for me to focus. And so that kind of takes the pressure for me to remember and have to actively keep track of how I'm spending my time. The alarm goes off and I say, okay, well, it's time to start getting ready for bed. Or the alarm goes off and it's okay, it's time to stop working on emails and go for a walk. Or, okay, my walk is done. It's time to start working on another project or to start teaching. So I structure my time that way, which as musicians, I think is really important because every day can look so different. So finding a way to stabilize your time and predict your routine as much as you can, it has been super helpful for me. And also just focusing on my physical well-being. That's something that I think I spoke to in the first episode of the season, that my physical wellness is something that hasn't been one of my main priorities, and I am really focusing on that. So like doing the meal prep and adding more activity into my routine. And with 3 dogs, that's really easy to do.
Yes.
And just making time for things that don't require me to actively be in professional mode all the time. So, there's this video game that I play every once in a while called Symphonia. Super cute. Even if you're not a video game person, I highly recommend. That's got this little violin guy and it plays little snippets from like famous violin pieces, like concertos and symphonies and stuff. And it's just like one of those things that I don't have to think at all. And it's great. So find you something, to turn your brain off, because you're a hard worker. And if you're thinking actively all the time, it's easy to get tired, even when you are taking care of yourself physically and in all these other ways.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You have to have something to unwind and do something completely radically different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I always put a timer. I'm like, okay, this is how long I'm allowed to play. And it's fun. And it's sometimes really frustrating.
Yeah. You're like,
because I'm not
minutes, Mom.
well, it's also kind of like it gets challenging. And I'm like, this is literally a game about a little violin guy. Like, why is this so hard? And my husband laughs at me because he's a big gamer. So he's like teases me about how frustrated. And I'm like, like I don't need this stress in my life. But then I'll play it still.
Yeah, totally.
So, well, if you're listening and this is like getting your ideas flowing, write some stuff down about like what you can do to just give yourself that time, rest, enjoyment, because life is too short to just be focused on classical music. And I know that that's not really what we're taught. We're taught to always be in service of the music, but music is our vessel, not the other way around. So I hope that this episode has sparked some ideas for you. And if you want to talk about them or share your ideas, you can find us both on social media. On Instagram, Katherine is at Katherine Eminet. There are a lot of E's in there, so we'll have a link in the show notes description. And you can get in touch with me. Find me at The Limitless Musician. We also have our YouTube channel, which Katherine has been dropping a lot of knowledge on Tuesdays about what it's really like to be in the real world of classical music. So if you haven't checked out that series, Real Talk Tuesdays, check it out because she drops a lot of gems. So it's kind of like a mini version, Katherine's own little podcast, but you get to see her beautiful face every week. So check it out. And we have some really exciting things coming up for this season of the podcast. So make sure you don't miss out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye. That's all for today's episode on The Limitless Musician. If you liked this episode, follow us on Instagram at The Limitless Musician to tell us what you want to hear next. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive content that won't show up anywhere else by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time.